our stance towards AI is generally not favorable, and I certainly don't need any experimental things being done. I feel like a fucking tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist when I say, like, I don't want Google experimenting with AI on my data. But I just feel like we've all gotten a little too comfortable with all of the data that everything is collecting all the time. And I most certainly do not need AI being trained on anything about me. No, thank you.
I was home with my parents this weekend, and my dad brought up like playing Alexa and Siri off of each other. And I was like, I'm so glad that I'm not an Apple user. Like, I don't even have, like, I know that Android has their own voice assistant, but I shut it off like,
Yeah,
fully.
I mean, I'm an Apple girly, unfortunately. I will break up with my iPhone at some point. I broke up with my MacBook a while ago. But I have Siri completely turned off. So you can't do Hey Siri, you can't even hold down a button to activate Siri because there's just nothing I need to know that badly that I have to ask Siri. And I know that there are lots of very practical applications for voice activated assistant stuff and they can be great for accessibility, but that's not what we're talking about.
I think we've gotten way too comfortable calling it AI. It's not intelligent. It's
Mhm.
it's a language learning model. It learns patterns and it gets really good at patterns. And like we've had elementary shit like this since the days of like God, all those chatbots back
Oh
in the
my
day.
god. What was the one? There was one big chatbot that now I can't remember what it was called. I think my subconscious is blocking it out.
See, I want to say it's Omegle, but it's not because that was something entirely
No,
different.
that was something else. Oh boy, your girl got into some trouble on Omegle back in the day. But yikes. Omegle keeping therapists in business since whenever it was founded.
Ugh.
Oh, but now it's gonna kill me trying to remember the name of it. That's okay. It'll come back to me in the middle of the night later.
In the hours before the dawn. Yeah, no, see, unfortunately, being the age that we are means even as somebody who has tried to learn sign, uh, my first thought when I see the letters ASL is not American Sign Language, it's age, sex,
Mm-mm.
location.
Yep. Which, of course, you answer with lie, lie, lie.
Yeah, uh-huh. Uh, ASL, 35,000 standard hours since hacking governor module. Um, sex, not
Sex,
applicable.
don't ask.
Location, location, corporation rim.
Mhm. Yeah, I was 27 years old in London for a long time.
um, talking about our beloved murder bot to bring it away from terrible decisions we made as children, I think brings us into our topic for this episode. And so tonight, from NPR Books, um,
Well, what's our location? Because it's, from NPR News in Washington, from NPR Books in.
from NPR Books in Faerun, I'm Katharine Hepburn.
Sure.
Why Katharine Hepburn? I don't know. My name's Katharine and I needed a last name.
I'm not questioning it.
Good. Uh, mm, I feel like this is a bonus clip, but it's already a bonus episode. So, like,
Listen, we're just bringing our silly energy. This is a chill day. This is a chill experience. So, what are we talking about, Bestie? Because it's not Tolkien today.
so Bestie, I guess that begs the question: is The Lord of the Rings a queer book?
Oh, that's such a good let's revisit that, and let's sort of thesis statement what we are doing here, because we are not talking about Two Towers. We're taking a little break because we're halfway through. We just wanted to take a minute during this little intermission time to sort of talk more broadly about queer lit in general and its role in our lives and our various thoughts about it. Because, as you have so astutely posed the question, I guess, is Lord of the Rings a queer book? My opinion is no, it's not. We're
No.
doing this queer reading and it is very robust, but is not a queer book. And you know, we don't want the people to think that they have to settle for crumbs of only ever reading queerness into things where it was not explicitly intended, because there's a lot of really good actual queer lit out there.
Well, and here's the thing is, I just finished reading Dune.
Mhm.
And so, there is queerness in that book. But Frank Herbert was a raging homophobe. And also it
Fascinating.
was
I
written
know
in
nothing about Dune.
1965. Um, so if you have only watched the movies or you don't know anything about Dune, you will not have seen this little bit. But Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who is the villain, is written to be a caricature of a fat, effeminate, gay pedophile.
Ooh, yikes.
That is it. Frank Herbert went, "What is the most disgusting creature I can think of?" And went here. And that's how he wrote uh, Baron Harkonnen. And that also is not queer lit.
Mhm.
So, I guess we'll start out with like, what is queer lit, and more accurately, what do we consider queer lit?
Yeah, because it's definitely debatable. There's not one objective answer. But I think we have, in our own discussions about this, agreed that queer lit is books that have either an out queer author and or explicitly queer characters. The story, if it's fiction, doesn't necessarily have to revolve around their queerness and the struggles that it causes. The queerness doesn't have to be central to the plot, but it does have to be present and explicitly acknowledged and like affect characters in a believable way. We do kind of make fun of some books for having a problem where characters will just offhandedly mention something that alludes to them being queer, and then is that a queer book? Is it not? I don't know. But we're looking for totally un unmistakable intentional representation, either on the part of the author or the characters. Would you agree with that in
I,
general?
yeah, I would make one argument because we already mentioned Murderbot, the Murderbot saga at the
Yes.
beginning of this, right?
You mentioned Murderbot.
I mentioned Murderbot because I love Murderbot.
I mean, I do too. Murderbot is wonderful. Murderbot is very important to me.
So I think, to my knowledge, Martha Wells, the author of Murderbot, is not queer. And Murderbot is not like meant to be a queer character. It is just an agender ace aro icon. um Definitely wasn't intended to be that way. They just are.
Yeah. Martha Wells unintentionally writing this phenomenal, phenomenal queer character. And she does have other explicitly queer characters in those books, but Murderbot is the blueprint.
Yeah, and I think in that case, you know, I would say the Murderbot books are queer books. And so I think in the case where you have, a book that doesn't otherwise meet our criteria, but there is a character that just so neatly defines the queer experience. I think we can identify that character as queer in that piece of literature as part of the queer literature corpus.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's fair,
Um,
and oh, sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say, much like our last bonus episode, or one of our last bonus episodes where we talked about Tolkien and his life and influences, there are entire fields of academic study about this.
I have a
Um,
degree in gender studies. I feel like I can speak with some authority, although I did not study queer literature specifically. Um,
mhm.
yeah, there's a
So
lot that you can there's a lot of nuance.
mhm. So we're just gonna go over, like, our own personal experiences with queer literature in general.
Yeah, we're not trying to be super academic here. I think that it's interesting and hopefully useful to just hear a relatable personal account of how we've come to queer lit, because I mean, what year did we start book club, which we'll talk about more later? Was that 2021?
2021.
Yeah, so before 2021, I had never read books with explicitly queer characters in them. I knew nothing about the whole world of queer lit and queer publishing, which I think also has evolved a lot since 2021. But, I've recently started from absolute zero in terms of knowing anything about this. So I think having it be a recent journey is also just kind of fun to reflect on.
Yeah. And, that's not to say that books that are not, there are books that I wouldn't necessarily define, like, as queer lit that are still, like, very positive representations of queerness and queer culture, and yeah. So, I think it's what is queer literature is a nuanced discussion, and you're not gonna get the same answer from any 2 amateurs out there.
Mhm.
But to sum up our points, and as Sam so eloquently put it earlier, we're sort of using the general definition of, like, it centers around queerness and queer characters, um, and or is by an out queer person
Yeah.
or persons.
We don't want to speculate about the identities of authors or anything like that. And, like we said, there's a lot of nuance, but just in terms of things that are explicitly, undeniably queer characters, out queer authors, things that you do not have to go out of your way to read queerness into, that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah. So I think, that's queer lit. That's what we focus on, in our own reading. That's what we focus on in our book club, which again we'll talk a little more about in a bit. Um, so, why do we personally as readers read queer lit? Um, and I think the most basic answer to that for me is I'm gay.
Wow, really? That's so brave of you.
I mean, that's a severe reduction of my identity, but
You're
I'm
so
queer.
inspirational. Wow.
I reduced my own identity down to a soundbite.
Were you going to elaborate on that, or was that you uh, passing it to me?
Toss.
Okay. Yeah, I am also queer. I think we've made that abundantly clear, abundantly queer, if you will. But yeah, I think that I have really made a significant amount of my personality based on being a very well-read person in terms of queer lit. And so it was interesting to me to kind of think of, like, why do I like to read these books besides just being queer? And I came up with some of my own little bullet points. So
Ooh.
I think the first one, which really is harkening all the way back to when I read Red, White, and Royal Blue back in 2021 or whenever that was, is feeling like an adult and coming into the adult phase of my personal lifelong reading journey. I feel like the little reading rainbow star should go over my head here. But I was one of those kids that I am sure you were, and that I'm sure a lot of our listeners were, where I was just a voracious reader as a child. I was reading constantly. It was a big point of pride of like how much stuff I could read, and reading all the time was a huge deal. And then I went to college and I read a lot in college for my classes, and then was just completely burned out on reading and didn't read for fun at all for years after I graduated. And I am married to someone who's a big reader, and I've always admired that about them. And I've always just seen them reading constantly and been like, how do you have time to read this many books? How do you do it? So I think that reading my first grown up queer book that gasp had sex in it and not just a single chaste kiss at the end, really moving from YA new adult into fully adult fiction was cool. It felt rebellious and grown up, even though I was already a super established grown up at the time. It was something that, I hadn't really experienced before as a reader. So I think that that was cool. It just felt like sort of a maturing and opening the doors to the stuff that I was now allowing myself to read and enjoy as a queer adult. So I think that was probably like the big, like feeling like a grown up, rediscovering that reading can be fun, and figuring out what reading as a hobby means for me in this post college grown up life. Those were like the two big things. And then I have more, but if you had more thoughts, you can share
I
your
mean,
thoughts.
yeah, I also was a big reader as a kid.
Mhm.
Like, um, have distinct memories of sitting underneath the coffee table, like curled in a ball, with a stack of like 6 or 7 Magic Treehouse books,
Oh my god, that's so
and I would read
cute.
all of them in an afternoon.
Oh, baby Ryn was just the cutest. Oh,
Baby Ryn had severe anxiety.
yeah. Baby Ryn could have read a lot more comfortable places than under the table, but you do you.
Baby Ryn, hmm, we won't dig into Baby Ryn's psyche. Moving on. Um, like you, I fell off reading sort of in high school, college realm of things.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a piece of that that was influenced by high school and college and like having to read so much for that. There was a piece of that that was influenced by me uncovering like music and podcasts and TV shows, and suddenly, losing my ability to sit still in silence for
Mm,
extended periods of time. And then also like not having time to go to the library as much and take out 4 dozen books that I then like didn't have the time or motivation to read because I was in high school.
yeah.
Um, and then got to college, and yeah, because I was a STEM major, I didn't like have as much explicit reading to do.
Mhm.
Although for one of my as an archaeology minor, I had to take a couple of cultural anthro classes, and so there was one of my cultural anthro classes. My professors were like, here's these 300 pages. We'll see you on Wednesday, and I'd be like, what the fuck?
Welcome to
And
my world.
it was, it was a 300 level cultural anthro course, and it was like me and like two other archaeology kids in a class with a dozen anthro majors.
Mhm.
Um, and they were all like, "Yeah, this is fine and normal." And I was like, "I'm dying."
Now read it in French, and then go to a 3-hour seminar and talk about it in French.
Yeah, I
Every
mean,
week, baby.
I'll stick with my 5-hour Orgo labs.
Ugh,
Thanks.
sounds like literal torture.
Yeah, but I got to make acetaminophen.
That's true. You
Um,
know where I can get acetaminophen? At the store.
well, I mean, literally, one of my students asked our professor, he was like, "Can I take this?" And my professor went, "How confident are you in your percent yield?"
Did he do it?
um, no, because
Oh.
rule number one of the lab, of any lab, except for geology and the occasional archaeology lab, is don't put it in your mouth.
Mm, true.
Don't
I guess that's responsible.
don't put it in your mouth. Just don't do it. But speaking of labs, that's
Mhm.
why I started reading again, is because at the peak of COVID, I worked in a COVID lab. I worked in a COVID testing lab. And so for 12 hours a day, I was on my feet running samples around this lab. And after one day where I listened to 14 straight episodes, because I was listening on like 1.5 speed or something, of the
Mhm.
Magnus archives, I decided that was too much for my psyche. And I went,
Yeah.
let's try audiobooks. And of course, also, this was like right after J.K. Rowling had made herself turf and chief. And so I was like, I need a nostalgia book that'll like allow me to sort of get over at the time I didn't like audiobooks.
Mhm.
Sort of get over the fact that it's an audiobook and like I'm not reading at my pace or in my own voices, like, and I can just go.
Mhm.
So I went, all right, what's some other books from my childhood? And I went back and I read, and listened to Percy Jackson, all the way through Percy Jackson. And then I went and I continued on with Rick Riordan's series because I'd gotten most of the way through Heroes of Olympus the first time I'd read it as a teen, and then sort of fallen off the wagon again because that was just the timing of the
Mhm.
books and my aging, right? So I listened all the way through that series, and then I got to Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. And as we previously mentioned, I'm a absolute slut for anything out of Norse mythology. And so I was like, this is my fucking jam. And in book two, The Hammer of Thor, skip ahead about 15 to 30 seconds here if you don't want to hear me talk about what happens in these books.
Which came out
Um,
quite a while ago, so it's, not
yeah,
exactly in the zeitgeist, spoilers, but that's very considered of.
point is, point is, in book two, they introduce a trans character. And Alex is gender fluid. And um, I remember stopping, like, with a bunch of samples in my hands and just crying in the middle of the lab. Like, thinking about what that would have meant to me to have a trans character as a middle schooler.
Mhm.
Like, before I even knew anything about the fact that I was trans. Like, would I have figured stuff out earlier? I don't know. Maybe. And in book three, Magnus Chase, the main character, expresses um, his feelings for Alex, regardless of what gender Alex is currently presenting as,
Mhm.
and identifies himself as pansexual. And so, you know, for a trans character to be out and loved, and the love interest of the main character,
Mhm.
um, was just so huge for me. And that was when I sort of went, all right, well, let's find myself some queer books.
Yeah.
Because, Rick Riordan writes some wonderful queer representation and has really improved with this, as his books have gone on. But, you know, I was like, all right, let's find some queer authors and queer books specifically. And I'd read like one or two in high school. I was president of my high school's GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, back when they were
Same
called that.
hat.
Hey. So like I had encountered books with queer characters before, but books with queer characters back when we were in high school, there were a few like happier ones, but by and large, it's like the fucking miseducation of Cameron Post.
Oh God, I could talk about the miseducation of Cameron Post. That's not what we're here to talk about, but yeah, I've read that one. It's a good book. It's just a
So
bummer. It's a fucking bummer.
yeah, so, like, unhappy endings, even from, like, books that were meant to be positive queer representation. So, I ended up picking up Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and read that, I think, in the summer of 2021. So this is, no, I read it like early spring of 2021 or late 2020, I think. It wasn't
Yeah, because
until
I read it in the summer.
you read it in the summer. You read it in late spring of 21, and that was when we ultimately decided to create book club.
Mhm.
So point is, had it for the first time in like late 2020, early 2021. And then moved on to Casey McQuiston's, at the time, other novel, One Last Stop. And that was how I kind of fell down the queer romance rabbit hole. And I read what queer YA romances and queer adult romances. And yeah, again, having like explicit sex on the page. And it was like, wow, this is wild. Again, like I'm a full adult.
Mhm.
It should not be something I'm encountering for the first time, is queer sex on page.
'Cause it's different than I mean, we've been on the internet a long time, we've read fan fiction. That's different. Having an actual book that, an author has written and put their real name on and a publisher has accepted and you can just get out in the world, that's a different feeling. It's a different experience.
Yeah. Um, so I think I really have to credit Casey McQuiston for the reason that I like jumped into the world of adult queer lit, was happy queer people,
Mhm.
happy adult queers who are dealing with their adult problems and lives and, you know, communities. And also at the time we were in lockdown. And so community was a big piece of things that we were searching for.
Oh my god, just
Um,
weeping about Red, White, and Royal Blue and all the friends hanging out together and going to parties and
Fucking
being
One
at
Last
home
Stop,
alone.
where they all have their like queer apartment and make and like throw queer dance parties and
Oh yeah,
shit.
I was thinking about One Last Stop, but I said the wrong CMQ book. But both of them, both of them. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that dovetails nicely into my last little bullet point for why we read queer lit and then sort of um transitioning into like our more recent journeys with it. I think it's also been the catalyst for me thinking about my own queerness more and differently because it was kind of mentally on the back burner for a while. I was super involved in the queer scene in college. I was, president of my own GSA at my high school. And, I am fortunate enough that being queer hasn't really caused a lot of issues for me in my life. I didn't really have to think about it in my day to day a lot. I lived in a super queer friendly area. I've been in the same queer relationship since I was 18. So it's not like I was out dating, I was not really, it was just sort of a background fact of my life. But then really thinking about other queer people and our representation in media made me sort of re-energized to be more involved in the queer community and to think about queer issues more, which was cool. Um yeah, and then we would read books together, or rather I would read books that you had already read because you needed someone to talk to about them. And I
I
would just
needed to
send you
yell.
and I really liked you and I wanted to impress you and get to know you better. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I will read this book.
Um,
Um
oh, I guess before
yeah,
before we jump into that real quick, just
yeah.
on the why is it important? Like, yes, on the one hand, we can see ourselves in these books, and that's huge. Representation is important. And, as we both talked about, our academic backgrounds, like we both analyzed and looked at, queer representations in media. But sometimes it's nice to not just like look at that from an academic sense. It's nice to just enjoy that
Mhm.
and be like, ah, yes, I am a person. These characters are people. We are both living our gay little lives. And that's fucking wonderful.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be tragic and intellectual and meaningful, and we don't have to pick every single piece of it apart. You can just enjoy it, and it can just be fun. And
Yeah.
although because we have the personalities that we love picking things apart, hence why you are here listening to our podcast. But I would text you basically line by line reactions to every single thing that I thought about every single book that I read. And because we share a brain cell, I was referring to that as, another installment of the Brain Cell Book Club. And so then you made an actual Discord server to make a book club to invite our friends to. And this podcast episode, although we are talking about a book club, this is not a launch/advertisement for the book club. It's just private for a couple of our friends. But yeah, so then we actually had this little platform to start talking to other people besides just each other about queer books.
Yeah. That was wonderful. And now that's been going for almost 3 years, that book club.
It's graduated and even expanded beyond just being our little Discord server where we talk about books to making actual friends and seeing each other in real life and going to concerts together and going to each other's birthday parties. And we have actually been able to help build and have the privilege of participating in like a real in-person community in a large part because of the efforts that we've made with book club. Like it gives us something to talk about when we are, chatting with coworkers or friends or whatever, or somebody who we think is cool, who we might want to get to know more, to say, hey, do you want to join my book club? And then you have another thing to talk about with that person. And that's been really incredible and really special.
I talked about it today with a coworker who's now part of it and who joined a few months back. Um, yeah, I really enjoy having like we wouldn't have had this queer community space and these queer friends without queer lit as a catalyst for that because we're all a little bit socially awkward as people,
Just a bit.
just a wee bit, and don't know how to like initiate conversations. But one of my great joys in life is always like bringing my friends from different friend groups, different situations together as one. And so I went, okay, here's my D&D friends, here's my college friends, here's my old roommate here and pull everyone together.
Mhm.
Now, let's all talk about the one thing we have in common, which is a love of gay shit.
And we've built and sort of overlapped the Venn diagram of all of those separate groups and integrated so much that, this past weekend, a book club friend who is, one of my spouse's childhood friends was in a concert. And so I went to go see it with your coworker and their spouse, and we were all there without the people who had initially introduced us because we had all formed our own friendships, and those connections never would have happened if it weren't for book club. And then suddenly we were all together in a high school auditorium listening to barbershop music and having a wonderful Saturday, and it was so cool.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, while you have said this is not a launch for a book club for us, um, but this is encouragement to go and start your own. And even if it starts like we started with like 6 people, I think, and put out a call on our Instagram, like who's interested, right? Because our Instagrams are just like people we're close friends with.
Yeah, I have
Um,
40 followers, it's not we don't have a big platform. You have more followers than I do, but
I do, but that's because that's my primary social media presence is Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, Point is, we started it super duper small, and then we grew it slowly and over time. And some people have come and some people have gone over time. Um, but we went, all right, we're gonna aim for like a book a month, and not everyone has to come to each meeting. It's all virtual. For a while, we had people on 3 continents
Mhm.
until my one friend moved back to this continent.
Sad.
Actually, both of them did. Um, but
Not that we're not happy to have them on the same continent as us, just that the circumstances were unfortunate for them, for the
yeah,
record.
um, when I went to, my cousin's wedding several months ago, I remember I was talking with, um, one of his friends and mentioned the book club, and she was not from my city, and she went, "Oh, like, I wish I had something like this," and mentioned, where she lived, and I went, "Listen, I just pulled a couple of friends together, like, I'm sure you could make it happen if you wanted to," and so that's my pitch, is if you want this queer discussion group, um, you can make that happen. And we highly recommend making that happen. As I said to my coworker today, I think book club is probably one of the best ideas I've come up with in the last decade.
I would agree with that. I mean, not that I've been privy to all your decisions the last decade, but it's a pretty good
There's been
one.
a
And
lot
there's
of bad ones.
and there's no qualifications to start a book club, I think when we had initially started, like you said, it's just a couple of friends who a lot of whom we were already in another Discord server with, so it was kind of redundant. It's not like it was different people, but this was just this is our area where we're going to talk about books and we're going to make it super low key and super low commitment. And we've experimented a lot with the format and figuring out how to schedule meetings and how to choose what books we want to read. But it's also been really cool to go from literally, like I said, starting at zero, not knowing any queer books at all and just having to Google ideas for gay books. And we read some real stinkers our first couple of months because none of us were really tapped into the queer publishing scene. We were just Googling like best gay books and trying to figure stuff out and just reading some ones that were not so great. To now, I feel like I am so in touch with the queer publishing world. It's something that I aggressively will talk to people about. Any queer person that I meet, I'll say, "Hey, do you like to read? Tell me what you like to read, and I will find you a book that you will love." Do you And I think also we were talking about romance and queer romances being our sort of intro to this world. Also, queer books that aren't romances. There's sci-fi, there's political thrillers, there's all kind every genre now has, and queer books have existed in astonishing variety for a long time, but really, especially the last couple of years, there's just been an explosion of choices where you can find literally anything with queer characters in it. And that's also a really fun thing to be able to do, to be like horror, thrillers, mystery. What do you want? We got it. And,
Yeah.
our stories don't just have to be centered on our suffering, and they also don't have to be centered on romance because, as we know and as we've talked about before, romantic love is not the end all be all purpose of life, and it doesn't have to be the end all be all of our representation either.
Yeah, so I mean, we found a lot of queer books through book club. I think one of my favorite little mini traditions that has cropped up is us doing our like end of year reading rundowns, because we're all like nerds for tracking our reading throughout the year and what books we read. Um, and we don't use some of us use Goodreads, most of us use Storygraph, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it is similar to Goodreads, but one, not owned by Amazon. Um, It is owned and run by a queer Black woman, um, who is, the whole team is super receptive to feedback, um, and it, like, breaks down your reading by mood and length and pace, and, um, I find it to be sort of a much more interesting, like, way of looking at my reading habits and
Mhm.
tracking my reading habits than Goodreads. I think Goodreads is still a useful place to look at reviews because more people use it, so you can find sort of more accurate reviews and longer reviews. Um, but Storygraph has, like, content warnings listed for every book too.
Yes, that was something that, especially for book club, has been really useful because, you know, queer lives are intense, queer lit is intense, and it is super helpful to be able to look at a book and see what, in a non spoiler way, what topics might come up and, be able to brace yourself for it. And we have had to tell people in book club too, like, these are the suggestions for this month. Please, 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 please read the content warnings before you vote on the book.
Yeah, because, like, sometimes the summaries, you would not assume that certain things are going to come up based on the summaries, and they do. And, I'm sure any reader has encountered that happening in a book, in any book, where you do not assume that something's going to come up, and all of a sudden something comes up, and it's either disturbing or just not what you were expecting one way or another. And the content warnings on Storygraph are super helpful for that.
Mhm.
I'll tag Storygraph in our social media post for this week. So if
Yes.
you're
Oh
not
my
familiar,
God.
you can check it out because it is a wonderful service, and we cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve if you're used to Goodreads. But oh, also another thing, because this is now just an advertisement for Storygraph because we love it so much, you can import if you have, an extensive Goodreads history and you don't want to lose all of your past progress and reviews and stuff. They have a feature where you can import everything from your Goodreads account into your Storygraph account. So you can have it all synced up and not lose anything, and it's amazing. Um, and I think,
Yeah, it's best if you do that once.
yeah, do it once right when you set up your account, and then don't use Goodreads anymore, except to vote for the Goodreads Choice Awards because that actually helps authors. But that's getting into the weeds of the the industry. But I think that also kind of connects back to just literally finding queer books, like you said, finding things from book club. There's the sort of basic level of just Googling gay books about X, books by gay authors, books by trans authors. You can do that. That's fine. But some of those lists just have a lot of stinkers on them. Some of them have the same books over and over. Like, as much as we love Casey McQuiston and Red, White, and Royal Blue, One Last Stop, those are foundational. Heartstopper, Alice Oseman, phenomenal graphic novels. You're going to see those on every single Song of Achilles. You're going to see on every single list. And you're going to see a lot of titles pop up over and over. And then if you're looking for more variety, I feel like the second tier, because in my bullet points, I have also broken this up into tiers of advancement and galaxy brainness. So sort of the second tier is like TikTok and Instagram, Book Talk, Bookstagram, respectively.
Book Talk is an interesting place.
It is. It's imperfect, but you will find more variety there than just Google, you know.
Mhm.
But did you want to expand on that a little bit? Because you're
No, just, I
you seem
mean,
really
neither
talkative.
of us are on TikTok anymore, so I feel like there's only so much that we can say about it at this
Yeah,
point.
it is there. Book Talk exists. We are not on it, so we can't really speak to it. Um, but it is there. You can find a lot of stuff there. I'm more so on Instagram, and so Instagram moves at a bit of a slower pace, but I find some stuff there as well. But I feel like what that can then lead into is it makes it easier to see broader patterns of what people are reading. And then you can see authors that come up a lot and then go follow those authors. And that's sort of like the next level of advancement, is like finding not just the influencers and the people talking about the books, but the people who are making the books and following them and seeing what's coming out that's like hot and fresh. So following authors, once you have read a couple of books that you like by the same author, or you see authors being talked about, you can see like, who are those authors following? Who are they talking about? And then like the ultimate galaxy brain tier that I am now on my Bookstagram use is following sort of the peripheral people, like not just the authors, but audiobook narrators, aka mostly just Natalie Naudis, because I love her and she's read anything that she reads, I will listen to because it's going to be gay and it's going to be amazing. Or like illustrators, like if you notice that you've read a lot of books with similar covers, like a lot of times illustrators will have a niche of books that they tend to do covers for. So I found a lot of sapphic romances from one book illustrator that I follow. So once you kind of tap into the community of all of the people involved in publishing those books, then you can see a lot of stuff that's like going to be coming out, or stuff that's new and different, and like see who's talking to each other in the publishing world. And then that's when you get like the fully plugged into the matrix, at least for me. Also, we have a friend who works in publishing, which is a cool connection to have.
It's very helpful, and she'll occasionally give us the latest, like, publishing drama or queer publishing drama. And she doesn't strictly work with queer books, in her day-to-day job, but she is still tuned into the industry.
And gets so many free books that we envy so much.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I find I sort of use all of that. I also use things like Libby. Um,
Yes, Libby.
the Queer Liberation Library on Libby, if you know, are getting a lot of your books through, like, Kindle Unlimited or Audible, great. Um, but if you want a free way to get lots of books, Libby is connected to your library card. Um, Particularly if you're in the US, although I believe there's certain Canadian libraries, I'm not necessarily sure sort of what the reach of it is around the world. But you put in your library card and then you are connected to your library's digital collection. And you can have multiple library cards. So, for example, we both have library cards for our hometowns that we no longer live in. And
Because libraries
for
aren't snitches. They'll be like, "Is this still your address?" And they'll say my mom's address, and I'll be like, "Yep." And they'll be like, "Okay, great. Your library card is renewed." They're not snitches. They
Mhm.
just want you to have a library card.
Yeah, honestly. I have a library card for the city I live in now, and also the city next door. and and then also the Queer Liberation Library, which we both just found out about recently.
We should tag
But as
them
a
too in our
we
socials.
will
Yeah.
tag them as well in our socials. They're a giant queer, like, digital archive, basically. And they have, thousands of queer books that you get access to with using, like, your email to get your library card, right? You just have to, like, live in the US and have an email, and
Mhm.
that's it. That's all you need.
And they have good books that I actually like, at least for me personally, that I wanna read, because some collections or archives can be really small and niche, which is amazing, but not necessarily going to be broadly appealing. Queer Liberation Library has a lot of stuff, and even some things that I haven't been able to find at other libraries that are just like contemporary rom-coms and other fun, silly books. They have a lot of stuff. It's free. It's You get your library card number. I think I got mine in like less than half an hour when I signed up. Totally,
I think it
totally
took me,
awesome.
like, 18 hours, and that was it.
Yeah, it's fast. And also just, your local library. If you don't have a library card, I would recommend getting one. I've been seeing a lot of videos lately of adults getting their first library card that they've had, you know, since childhood basically. And it's really fun just to watch people experience the library for the first time in a long time, because libraries are great.
If you are of our generation, you may be familiar with the phrase, having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card.
Having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. Having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card.
Yeah, it's
So,
yeah, your library is
highly
free.
recommend libraries. Highly recommend Storygraph will sometimes have like articles or collections of books up. Places like Bookshop, which is another like a storefront alternative to Amazon, online storefront that supports small local bookshops. Your local bookstore. Um,
Mhm.
I will frequently go to my local bookstore, wander around, snap photos of books, and then go check them out of my library. And if I really
Or
like them, I will go back to the bookstore and support the author by buying the book.
there's also the alternative, which you haven't done in a while, but I'll just put you on blast a little bit, that you used to do frequently, where you would text me and say, "Oh, I'm going to go in the bookstore just to look, just to browse because I'm in the area." And then I'd get a phone call from you about an hour later where you're telling me that you bought too many books to carry and they had to give you a bag. And now you have a giant pile of books that you're taking home. So, you know, depends on how much
Listen,
restraint you have.
I yeah, I do have my book policy, which is I only buy books that are on sale or that I've read before or that I've read the author before.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah. Um, that has helped me, but it does not save me.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing to sort of be when we're talking about some of the imperfections of book talk and bookstagram. There can be a lot of promotion of overconsumption in those spaces of saying like this is my book haul that I got and it's a million books. And they're pretty and they're nice, but they're also expensive. Buying books is not a cheap hobby all the time. At least if you're trying to get, the contemporary queer lit that we're talking about that, as it's coming out is not going to be the used book that's on sale for $2 at your used bookstore. Although those are fun, we're thinking about things that are more contemporary usually. Um, but your library is free. And a lot of people aren't talking about how great libraries are. You might have to wait a little while if something is on hold, but you can just put it on hold. And if it's digital, you'll get it as soon as it's available. Or if it's a physical book, they'll just send you an email that you can come pick it up. Or some libraries will even mail books to you if you can't come pick it up. So, if you just have a little bit of patience, put a couple things on hold and then read whatever comes in first.
Yeah. We cannot recommend your local library enough. And oftentimes during like Pride Month, local libraries will do like Pride Month displays.
Yeah.
Although
Um,
all sorts of shit happening throughout the US with that.
yeah.
But we won't get into
Yeah.
that right now.
When we were brainstorming doing this episode, there was a little voice in the back of my head saying, should we talk about bans, book bans happening in the US? And the answer that I decided on my mind was no, because I don't want to. I just want to carve out a little joyful corner to talk about queer books. But that is also, unfortunately, a reality in the US that
Yeah.
libraries and schools are making it harder.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that is the other reason for things like Libby and digital library access. So, if you don't have access to a library that is openly stocking queer books, or you don't want to, be wandering around with a physical copy of a queer book, no one can see your audiobook.
Mhm. And audiobooks, by the way, are real books. They are reading, they count. Absolutely. They count if you listen to them sped up. They count if you listen to them a little bit at a time. If anyone gives you shit for listening to audiobooks and they say it's not really reading, then they're just a loser and you don't have to listen to them. It is a requirement for our book club when people are submitting things. We have very few requirements. There's very few rules. But one of the rules is any book that we consider has to have an audiobook option because we are not trying to sit in silence with our thoughts reading a book. And also for accessibility reasons, they're great.
Yeah, and as someone who can listen to things at work, like while I'm in the lab, audiobooks are great. I get so much reading done at work.
Same, honestly.
Although depending on the book, I do have books that I cannot read at work.
Or some books that you think are fine, and then you get to certain scenes like, oh, I am not reading this at work. Never mind.
She kissed down her waist. Oh, okay, we're moving on to another.
Yeah, there are certain adjectives and certain verbs where I just know, oh, okay, that's fine. But yeah. Do we want to pitch any of our favorite queer book? I just prepared 3 that I like, and then just go into sort of general other thoughts, tips, advice, encouragements, etc.
I have a few, yeah, that I would love to mention if you want to start off.
Okay, sure. So I have 3 because, like I said before, a lot of the lists that you will find and a lot of stuff on social media will often have the same books listed over and over again. So I tried to think of some that are perhaps a little less all over the place. And these are in no particular order. They're just 3 queer books that I really, really like. The first one is A Memory Called Empire by Arcady Martine, which is, was that on your list too?
Yes.
Because we didn't compare notes ahead of time. I didn't ask you what your books were. So this
I
is
came
all.
up with them as we were talking too.
Oh, I love the brain cell. Yeah, so this is, you're getting live reactions, listeners. So anyway, A Memory Called Empire. Fucking phenomenal sci-fi about empire, obviously, and imperialism and what it means to be colonized and how we construct our identities through the language that we speak, in terms of like word choice, but in terms of also just different languages and how our words create our reality.
This
Amazing,
pure
amazing
Worf
book.
effect, just all over the place.
It's so good. Absolutely recommend it if you like sci-fi, if you like language, if you like politics, if you like gay people in space. And that's a good example of queer fiction that there is some gay sex in it, but and
But
the
only in book
relationship
2.
between oh
They
yeah,
kiss
only
in
in book
book
2.
1, and then there's no.
Yeah,
Which I
so they
suppose is
kiss.
the world's most minor of spoilers, but
Yeah, spoilers, they kiss in book 1. But the romantic relationship is not the central part of the plot. There are so many complicated layers, and it's so wonderful. I enjoy it, and I always recommend it. The other ones are Ace by Angela Chen, which we try. Oh, is that also on your list? We'll probably be 3 for 3 because based on this, you're going to have a third one too. But anyway, Ace. Everyone in the world should read Ace. It's nonfiction, which is why I was like, oh my god, I have some nonfiction on this list. If you are Ace, if you're allo, if you're not sure, if you're whatever, if you're queer, if you're not queer, everyone should read Ace. And just for the sake of unpacking a lot of things that we take for granted about the role of sex and sexuality in our society, in our lives, so absolutely phenomenal. I think it's one of the most popular assignments that we've had in our book club and one of the ones that people have liked the most.
hang on, I can pull up our spreadsheet.
Oh yes, pull up the spreadsheet.
Because
Well, I talk about another very popular book club pick that is definitely going to be on your list. I'm sure you had Real Queer America.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, by Samantha Allen. Phenomenal. Would you call it a memoir? What would you like categorize it as?
Memoir meets travel writing meets investigative journalism. Because
I
Samantha
think
Allen is an investigative journalist. Like that's her thing.
yeah. And when did she write it? Was it in a post-Trump world?
Oh, I want to say 2017.
2017. Yeah, so like freshly post-election America, Samantha Allen, who's a trans woman, traveling across the country to different queer communities in red states. And it is such an amazing book. It will make you a little less hopeless about America. It will help you think about, especially if you have sort of the coastal elite liberal
Blue state
disease
brain
of
rot.
blue state brain rot. That's very clever. Of looking down on people in red states, which I think a lot of us are guilty of, unfortunately. Um, really helping you challenge some perceptions about people who live in different areas of the country and just beautiful stories of queer people living their lives in the US is another one that I recommend to people, and another one that some of our friends have read with other book clubs that are primarily straight. And that's led to some really interesting conversations. That's, A Memory Called Empire is very sort of out there and weird, but Real Queer America is so accessible. And if you live in America, you would probably get something out of it. And even if you don't live in America, it's a really interesting portrait of our country. But those are just three queer books that, like, in my recent journey in the last couple of years, I'm obsessed with and that I recommend frequently.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting portrait of America, but it's also a really interesting portrait of how queer communities form
Hmm.
and why they form and how they're kept together.
Yeah.
So I will second all three of those. I love Ace, particularly for how it discusses um, creating non-sexual intimacy in any relationship, whether that's a
Hmm.
romantic relationship, whether that's a sexual relationship, whether that's a platonic relationship, familial relationship, anything. Creating intimacy of any kind and closeness um, with people you would like to be close with. I think, and then it's also got a really interesting model of consent that I really like.
Yes. Oh my God. How did I forget to talk about the consent model? That's It's so good. It's everything. Go read it.
No, it is a fantastic book. I have given it to cishet allosexual friends um, who have come back and been like, I have some questions, and I've been like, great, let's sit down, let's talk about this.
Hmm.
Um, it is a wonderful book, and as somebody who identifies as on the ace spectrum, I learned a lot about myself through it, and then I also sort of started my journey through relationship anarchy through that book,
Yes.
which is also huge for me and my own queerness and my own relationships and how they've developed in the last several years. Um, and then A Memory Called Empire is just one of the best goddamn books that I've ever read. All three of those, as a note, are three of our most popular assignments in book club ever. Real Queer America is our most popular assignment in book club,
Hmm.
according to our spreadsheet, because we're nerds and we have a spreadsheet.
We have multiple spreadsheets, or I guess one spreadsheet with multiple tabs that mostly you
Yeah,
maintain. But yeah, we
I
got we
do.
got data.
I do. Um, but to talk about a couple of other ones that I want to throw into this list, I mean, those were the big three.
Brain cell.
those were definitely the big three.
I would apologize for stealing your thunder, but mostly I'm just thrilled that we had the same big three.
um, I'll also mention Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone's epistolary novel, This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is
Yes.
a love story, and um, I, it's really hard to describe. It's just a beautifully written book. Um,
Did that one, I think that was the one that somewhat recently, within the last year or two, really blew up on Twitter because there was some fandom that thought that it was a good representation of two of their characters. And then the book just exploded and had like its highest sales ever. And the authors were like, thank you to this fandom for blowing up my weird queer time war romance book. It's hard to
Yes.
explain, but it's very short and it'll change your life.
I also think anything Akwaeke Emezi has ever written
Yes.
is phenomenal. Every single book of theirs that I've read is a bummer,
Yeah.
but they are also all fantastic. So that's Pet, that's The Death of Vivek Oji, that's Bitter. They have one or two other novels as well. Let's see. I'm scrolling through my list here. Becky Chambers, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Again, science fiction. Um, I think queerness is. I think sci-fi is a really ripe genre for to explore queerness in. That's a great one about queer community and family. Let's see, anything else that's sort of like not going to be on the big lists, because you'll certainly find things like Legends and Lattes and all of the Casey McQuiston books and Written in the Stars, and Cemetery Boys and things like that will be on all of the big lists.
And they're good, and you should read them if they seem appealing to you. We are not knocking those books at all. We are just
Oh
trying to
no, I think
leverage our really niche experience and bringing up some of the other ones that aren't going to be on those lists.
Yeah, I think all of those are fantastic reads. I enjoyed all of them. The Song of Achilles is amazing. Also, as a Greek mythology nerd, I had a great time with that one. um,
And, like I sort of mentioned before about being able to find a suggestion for anyone, no matter what they like. First of all, if you are looking for suggestions, please DM us on Instagram. We would be more than happy to recommend literally the nichest book your little gay mind can dream up. If you want recommendations, we will recommend things to you. But also just in terms of genre, I'm a big horror reader, and horror also has a lot of queerness in it. There is a lot of bad things happening to queer people and queer people being villains, but there's also, I think, horror just like explores things that scare us and things that are taboo and things that are not generally culturally acceptable. And so there are also a lot of queer heroes in horror, and queer people overcoming things and using horror to represent things that we struggle with and then getting to fucking burn it all down at the end. There's so much, and it's so exciting
Camp
to think about and talk
Damascus
about.
by Chuck Tingle.
Dr. Chuck
Dr.
Tingle to
Chuck
you.
Tingle.
I had never experienced the Tinkleverse directly, but Camp Damascus fucking rules, and we could do a whole bonus episode just on Chuck Tingle. But that would
I
actually
also
be really
really
fun.
enjoyed, I read a short sci-fi novella called The Scourge Between Stars, which has also got a queer main character. Definitely not as good as Camp Damascus, but still excellent. Oh, also Murderbot. Again, as we mentioned sort of at the beginning of the episode, it's not like technically Murderbot is not queer. And Martha Wells is not like an out queer woman. So, and we won't speculate as to whether or not she is queer. But it is, I think, a beautifully queer series.
Yeah, if you want the queer, non-monogamous space sci-fi future of your dreams, the Murderbot
I
series is
mean,
the place to go.
there is still end stage capitalist corporo state bullshit going
But
on
they're
in
fighting
Murderbot.
against it. They're fighting against it.
Oversay and Errata have my entire heart. And Murderbot and Art are the queer platonic relationship of my dreams.
Absolutely. I mean, besides the queer platonic relationship that you are talking to right now, but the one that can exist in
Yeah,
your
but
dreams.
you don't exist in my dreams. You're a real person.
This is true. I do dream about you a lot. You and my spouse and my dog are like the most frequent characters in my dreams. That, and I dream about going to my college dining hall to get a personal pizza, but then I can't find the personal pizza area. My dreams are pretty predictable. But anyway, Murderbot is great.
I think that's where we end it. Do we have anything else we want to talk about?
I mean, I feel like there's so much we can talk about. There's the whole discussion of, like you brought up, about what it would have been like to see the queer representation that exists now when we were kids or when we were
Mhm.
younger people, even in high school and early college. And I have some younger queer members of my family who are now growing up with stuff like Heartstopper, the books and the TV show, and all of this incredible queer rep everywhere you look. And I feel like such an old geezer talking to them and going, "You literally have no idea how different your world is from my world." And I'm not that much older than you. I'm 10 years older than my sister. And it is astonishing how much more there is and how much more acceptable and diverse and cool all of the queer media is that's out there. So it's a really exciting time for
I remember
queer lit.
talking to my cousin and her wife about, one of the books we read for book club, Moby Dyke
Mhm.
by Krista Burton. Um, and they're being sort of like, they're both in their early 30s, and they're
Mhm.
being sort of like a half second of like, wait a minute, there's a book title published
Mhm.
with that.
And it's just on
And
the shelf and anyone can see it.
and then being like, yeah, no, it's about a lesbian woman. It's a memoir by a lesbian woman in her early 30s talking about her experiences with the queer community and what it means to be a lesbian married to a trans man and going to disappearing queer bars and queer communities and queer spaces. And anyway, it's another great read. I really enjoyed that one. One more bummer read that I do think is a
Oh, I know
good
what this
read,
is gonna
but
be.
is dark. Yeah, is How to Survive a Plague.
Mm. Mhm.
With
I
How to
wanna say
Survive
it's
a
by
Plague,
David France.
David
I could be wrong.
France. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. How to Survive a Plague, The Inside Story of How Citizens and Science Tamed AIDS by David France. Um, I think if, we are not young, brand new queers at this point, but we are young enough to not remember anything from the AIDS crisis and to not be born actually for any of it. um, and I think for those of us who, are of that generation, I think it's kind of essential to look back on what our predecessors did and fought for and what they died for.
Yeah, I would go so far as to make a rather extreme statement and say that if you weren't alive for the AIDS crisis, it is your moral duty to learn about it. You don't necessarily have to read How to Survive a Plague if you don't want to, because it is a very, very, very long book. I think it took both of us quite a while to get through. But when you are in the headspace to do it, either read that book, read something else, even just learn about individual people who were alive during that time and the things that they did. Because I thought I had a kind of a grasp on what happened during the AIDS crisis. I did not. I learned so much just from that book. And
Mhm.
so much of that history was actively erased. And the people who were alive during that time were actively killed by, the US government and the AIDS crisis and the homophobia of our society. So it
And
is,
they acted up.
hell yeah, they did. And, it's really absolutely critical that we as queer people are educated about the AIDS crisis. Um, so yeah, not to like end on a super bummer, but I feel very passionately about learn whatever you can when you are in the headspace to do so, because it's really important and it will give you such an appreciation for so many things about this comfortable queer life that we're able to enjoy today, where we can go and buy Moby Dyke at Barnes and Noble and we can have this podcast and not lose our jobs. Not that we want our
Mhm.
employers to hear all the horny things that we say on this podcast, but
Oh
you know
god,
it's
no. Oh god.
the world is a different place. You know, thinking about the difference between me and my sister, the difference between now and 2024 and, you know, the 70s, 80s, 90s.
I
Shit's
mean,
changed.
hell, thinking back to when we were in high school and, you know, when marriage equality was not the law of the land,
Hmm.
and hell, the things I did to fight for marriage equality in my home state.
Yeah.
And just thinking now, 10 years later, how much has changed. But yeah, I guess to bring it back around, you know, one of the important purposes of queer lit is to help us learn, right? To
Hmm.
help us learn about our past, to help us learn our past as a community, to help us learn about our present, ourselves, right? To help us learn who we can be. And I think, and who we want to be,
Hmm.
right? And so, you know, while I love coming home and reading a queer book in which, you know, that's just basic escapism for me. I can come home and read something that I'm not actually really getting anything out of other than, man, these two people are gay and hot and they're fucking.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say this is just nonstop, the most depraved shit you can imagine. While
um,
I'm just like making my little blueberry muffins in my kitchen. Like
you
la
know,
la la, beep beep beep, glass breaking, dogs barking, chicken squawking.
yeah, you know, that's wonderful.
That's valid.
And then also having the option to learn about queer history and queer future. I just, yeah, we hope that this is, if you are not reading queer lit, we hope this is an inspiration to go and read queer lit. You do not have to be queer to read queer lit. It is just, for us as queer people, been a wonderful part of our journeys.
Mhm.
But much like reading uh, authors of any experience that is not your own, um, is helpful. Straight people, you should read queer lit.
And white people, you should read Queer Lit by authors of color. And by, you know, able-bodied queer people, read books by disabled queer authors. There's so much diversity within this queer lit umbrella. Just
Mhm.
find people with different experiences because it's great.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to us talk about our experiences with queer lit. Next week, we will come back and return to our favorite gay couple, Frodo and Sam.
The book that we are making queer.
The book that we are making queer, if it kills us.
Yeah. Not that we were the first ones to do so, but we're still very passionate about it.
And you know who are also passionate about each other? Gimli and Legolas.
Of course, they so are. Relationship goals.
So, if you want to stick around with us through the next half of Two Towers and into Return of the King, you can do so by subscribing to our podcast if you haven't already. Um, you can follow us on our social media at FanappPod, FANAPPPOD, on Instagram, X, TikTok, and Tumblr. You can shoot us an email at thefandomapprentice@gmail.com. Like Sam said, if you would like a queer book recommendation, shoot us a message or an email. We would absolutely love to dispense recommendations.
That would be probably the highlight of our month. If we were able to recommend queer books to one person, we would then talk about it for the rest of forever.
Uh-huh.
Which, you know,
We would be so happy.
maybe that's too much pressure, but we would be really excited.
um yeah, so and if you would like to message us about anything else to do with our podcast, you are welcome to do so. Our DMs are open. And otherwise, please, if you like what you're hearing, for our typical Tolkien episodes, for our bonus episodes, anything, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. It helps other people find the podcast. Tell other people about the podcast. Start your own gay book club and tell your book club mates about the podcast. Have a podcast club. I don't know.
Yeah, make a club about whatever you want. Make a bird watching club. I don't know. Just connect with other queer people and maybe also read some books.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening. And we will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Ryn Sam. Our music was composed and performed by James, and our art is by Casey Turgeon. This podcast is created for non-commercial entertainment purposes, and the opinions expressed therein are our own and are not reflective of the opinions of any other person or organization. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien estate and is used here under fair use.